In this video, we're going to look at some of the kingdoms that emerge in medieval Europe that are later going to lay the foundations for these countries. So, beginning in the 8th century, foundations were laid for many of these modern European nations. Although their borders are going to remain fluid, meaning that their borders are going to change, some significantly, some not so much. In the coming centuries, the political basis of these countries like France, England, and Spain are going to begin to appear. In 987, the Capetian dynasty assumed French rule under Hugh Capet. Capet is a nickname meaning wearing a cape. At the time, France was a collection of semi-independent states that included Normandy, Flanders, Anjou, and Aquitaine. And Capet thus had limited royal authority, and the nobles in the territories only gave him token allegiance. And kind of harkens back to the age of Greece, where you saw those loose city-states that kind of acted as independent nations at times. Later, Philip II is going to manage to bring several feudal territories claimed by England under French control. His military successes also enable him to gain more authority over the nobility, and by the reign of Philip IV, from 1285 to 1314, France became the most powerful state in Europe. Let's look at England. In 1066, the Normans, a French-speaking group of Viking descendants who had settled in northern France, invaded England and toppled the Saxon king. Under William the Conqueror, the Normans established an Anglo-Norman government that slowly integrated traditional customs of the region with Norman traditions, and William the Conqueror imported French-style feudalism into England. After William's death in 1087, England went through a time of brief destabilization after his heirs are going to fight over titles and property and who should reign. The country regains its strength under Henry II, and from 1154 to 1189. And Henry's going to institute a single common law code, which was applied equally to citizens, and he also creates a unified court system, which included jury trials. We're going to get some very important legal ramifications from the descendants of this in England that are going to directly impact our experiment in democracy here in America. One of those specifically, you see on the right here, a photo of the Magna Carta. England experiences many instances of conflict between the king and the nobility, and so the situation becomes critical under King John. In an effort to raise money for war against France, John is going to very heavily tax the nobles, and this weakens his support throughout the country. The nobles don't want to pay the taxes. The king needs the taxes. He presses them to pay, and so it's not a good relationship between the two. And so after John was defeated in France, the nobles rebel against him, and they force him to sign the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is Latin for Great Charter, and this document guarantees the rights to nobles and dramatically limits the power of the king. When we write our own constitution, we draw from the Magna Carta, limiting the power of our executive branch, just like the Magna Carta limits the power of the king. In practice, it meant that a great council made up of the king's leading vassals had to approve any taxes levied beyond the king's personal revenue, and in theory, the Magna Carta established the principle that the king was not above the law. Ordinary English people didn't benefit from this immediately, but over time, the principles of this document were extended to protect the rights of all citizens. And what you see in England is a progression and an evolution of more democracy and more rights for the people, beginning in 1215 with this Magna Carta. So let's look at the development of Parliament. As the 13th century progresses, English kings continually need money, especially for war. The Great Council, later what we call Parliament in England, and this comes from the French word parler, meaning to speak, wanted to control royal spending and, consequently enough, the power of the monarch. It's always about power, politics, money, religion, when we look at the changing of things here. So when Henry III resisted Parliament's attempt to extend its influence, a rebellion is going to happen. Henry was temporarily removed and replaced by a parliament led by one of the nobles. Henry's son, Edward I, is going to retake the throne in 1265. Edward wants to be granted the power to collect more money from the people, and called for 2 knights from every county and 2 residents from every town to be assembled within the King's Great Council. This was considered to be England's first representative parliament. Eventually, Parliament was organized into 2 tiers, 2 houses, so to speak. This should look familiar because this is also the shape, the form that our legislative branch takes today. And although we use the same format, we do call it different terms. England calls theirs the House of Lords, which is representative of the nobles and the church lords, and the House of Commons, which represent the knights and the residents or the peasants at that time. And so those are their 2 houses. We know that we call ours Congress collectively and not Parliament, and that our upper house is the Senate and our lower house is the House of Representatives. Parliament can approve taxes, discuss policies, and work with the monarch to make laws. So that's the job of Parliament in England. Looking at these Italian city-states, after the fall of the Roman Empire, the various states that are located on this Italian peninsula, and if you haven't located Italy on your map, this is where it is, looks like our boot, they're going to remain independent, these city-states, independent of one another. And we refer to them as city-states because some of them are as small as a city or a single city. And these territories are sometimes controlled by Germanic tribes, and other times they're controlled, or they're under the rule of the Byzantines or the French or whoever had conquered them at the time. One of the few exceptions was the Papal States, which include the city of Rome. And this area is going to remain important due to its location as the headquarters of the Catholic Church. Discussion questions. Again, write them down. If you have questions about the answers, let me know. The power of the French kings grew slowly over several centuries in the Middle Ages. Explain why the feudal basis of the king's power and authority made it hard for French kings to unify their lands quickly. In England, the Magna Carta was an agreement only between the king and his most powerful nobles. Why then did it come to be seen as a key founding document in England's representative democratic system of government? Like much else in the Middle Ages, modern political states grew from feudal arrangements. How did the English Parliament, with its House of Lords and House of Commons, arise out of England's feudal system? If you will answer those questions, we have a couple more videos to get through, and then we'll be through with the Middle Ages and moving on.